Hello, we are now in the second part of Module 3, which focuses on actors and stakeholders. In the previous part, we said that the participatory processes aim to bring together the institutional expert and stakeholders' knowledge for better understanding the existing context and developing solutions for achieving commonly agreed objectives. In this part, our learning goals are related to understanding and recognizing the importance of actors and stakeholders in these participatory processes. We define as actors those individuals who have the power to implement change. In our case, these are the innovations in the peripheral rural areas that we are interested in. The stakeholders, on the other hand, are those individuals who may have direct or indirect interest in the area. It is very important to underline the fact that we have to be very careful to involve all actors and stakeholders in the territory, or at least to provide them the opportunity to participate in the innovation process and the visioning process for the peripheral rural area. The importance comes from the fact that giving the equal opportunity for participation to all actors and stakeholders from the peripheral rural area means that we improve the transparency of the process. Also, we improve the trust between the participating actors and stakeholders. And in this way, we improve the trustworthiness of the process itself and the commitment of the actors and stakeholders to the commonly agreed objectives. We should never underestimate the process of identifying all relevant actors and stakeholders and involve them in this process. Particular attention has to be paid to the less powerful actors, stakeholders, to those unheard voices, which very often contain and hold the local and traditional knowledge, particularly in peripheral rural areas. Clearly, actors and stakeholders have different perspectives and different interests, but if each of them acts according to his or her mandate towards the commonly agreed vision, then their individual efforts and work will be more clearly integrated, and the overall effect that will be achieved will be more pronounced. How do we go about identifying the stakeholders and actors in a given area? It's not an easy process, but it's a process that once starting very quickly populates with different representatives of actors and stakeholders. We can start with households, see where their interests are, individual citizens, what are their issues, what are their topics that are being discussed. Farmers, what type of farmers are there? Livestock farmers, plant production, arable farmers, all different types of farmers with their interests and issues in the territory. And these are probably the representatives of business with the most fixed asset in the area, and this is their land. They can't easily move their farms if we think about their future needs and development. Then we have the local authorities who are responsible for the development of the territory and who have official rights and responsibilities in this perspective. We may have different businesses like guest houses, other local businesses, food-related or not food-related. They're the advisors to farmers, to local businesses, and very often they're the ones that shape the needs and the responses of the local businesses. We have the farming authorities, which may not be based in the specific rural territory, but they shape the requirements for farmers. They provide support to farmers, so they have a very pronounced role into what happens in the specific rural territory. There are then other tourism services which may be related to guest houses, which may be part of a local authority as a tourist information center, for example. So there can be different tourism services we have to identify if their tourism is developed in their territory. Then we have local action groups, which are some of the historically most innovative forms of organization in rural areas back in the 1990s, through the leader approach and more recently from the community-led local development approach, which provides funding to rural areas as well as to urban areas, not only from the common agricultural policy, but also from other regional and cohesion funds of the European Union. We may have researchers with an interest to study the situation in the rural areas or to study the effects of certain approaches in the rural areas. Then there are different authorities like the veterinary and hygiene authorities, and these are particularly important when we speak about high nature value farming systems. Another type of local organizations that are related very much to innovation in rural areas. These are the European Innovation Partnership on Agriculture operational groups, which are usually comprised by farmers and researchers and advisors and other potential stakeholders and actors. Different aspects in the rural territories are the conservation aspects, nature conservation aspects. These are individuals with interest in nature conservation, but they can be protected areas in the territory, whether they're national parks or nature parks or Natura 2000 zones, and their management bodies. We have the environmental authorities, which again may not be based in our specific rural area, but they can be regional bodies or national bodies, and they may have influence on our territory. We have, of course, the green environmental NGOs that may be active, again, from the territory of our interest, or can be national or international NGOs that have particular interest in the area's conservation values. And they can be different other authorities or businesses or advisors that actually have effects on the peripheral rural area that we are working in. The next slides provide example of how these identification of actors that participated in the development of high nature value farming vision as part of the HNV link project. And the first example is from Portugal, where our colleagues there identified 7 key groups of actors that have interest in high nature value farming in the area. They started from the farmers and land managers who are actually managing the HNV land. Equally big importance and participation in the development of the vision was coming from the representatives of the administration. And in this case, the team there grouped local administration, the representatives of municipalities, and national administration, the representatives of nature and forest conservation, and the directorates of agriculture, and the planning and policy making authority in one group as representatives of the public administration. Another group are the representatives of research institutions. Then we have the producers associations, whether they are cattle, sheep, or pig producers. Some other companies related to the cultural values of the territory and the recreational values of the territory. Then NGOs, particularly again the local action groups through the leader approach that have an interest in the territory, and consumers who are an important actor with particular interest in the products coming from H&B system. A different approach for the identification of the actors was taken by the colleagues in the UK, who have identified 10 groups of actors, but then made an assessment against their contribution to innovation, whether they're innovators themselves, whether they foster innovation, or whether they disseminate innovation. And this role was assessed in terms of to what extent they do that. Hardly at all they do it, or they do it to some extent, or in some cases, or only to small, with a small scale impact, or whether they have major impact. And they also distinguished the stakeholders, whether they're individuals, collective representatives, interests of collective representation, and state stakeholders. So this is the second example of how stakeholders and actors can be assessed and grouped for the development of a common vision. A third example is from our colleagues from Ireland, who identified and grouped then the actors for the development of their H&B vision according to the territorial scope of the participants in the vision development. So they identified the local, the regional, national, and international interests and representatives of different interests there. And then again looked at the farmers, local communities, NGOs, advisory services, leader groups, researchers, administration, national or farming associations, and the international representatives who are representing UNESCO territories, etc., different networks. So only three examples here presented, but they are given to show you that depending on the specific interest, depending on the experience of working in the territory and the tradition of working in the territory, we may have different approaches to grouping stakeholders and actors when we work for a common vision in this territory. The approach is only as important as it is going to serve the needs of the specific territory. So there is no one size fits all approach to actors and stakeholders identification. It's important to do it in the best way to address the needs of the specific territory. However, there are some questions to consider when we are doing this stakeholder and actor analysis, and then the grouping can be done according to the specific outcomes and specific needs. The questions that we need to consider, of course, starting with identifying who are these actors and stakeholders. Does any of them have some unique status in the territory, some traditional rights, some traditional obligations that have to be considered in the overall process of territorial vision development? What are their shared and stated positions? Do they have already a formed opinion on how it should be looking like? What are their interests? Whether they have some concerns, fears, some stated goals? What are their values and worldviews that may influence the formulation and the discussions of these commonly achieved objectives that we'll be aiming towards? What are the relational histories between the actors and stakeholders? Histories of collaboration and cooperation, histories of opposing interests, how we can react to them so that they do not influence negatively the process of vision development. What are their incentives to change the existing situation? Their incentives to collaborate or to compete? Do they have an incentive to learn how to do it so that they participate longer in the process? Do they have incentive at all to enter in such collaborative process? Or are they better off doing what they have to do personally for their business, for their interests by themselves? Then is there sufficient trust between the different actors and stakeholders? Is there sufficient trust in the process that has started towards the development of a common vision? Can it be built? What is necessary to build it? How long it will take to build that? Can the representatives or the individuals among the actor or stakeholder groups work together? Are they available for the long-term process that we aim to enter in? Or are they the representatives likely to change? So every time the institution sends different representatives, and we have to explain to them the situation and the interest over and over again. Do these representatives, particularly the representatives of institutions, have some restrictions as to express their opinion or the opinion of their institution? Do they have the authority to do that? Are they given this authority to do that? And last but not least is if our actors and stakeholders have sufficient and adequate knowledge and skills to participate in such innovation, visioning, innovation process to make a successful participation and to contribute adequately to the process. Are they able to process the information and develop systemic thinking? Do they communicate constructively? And do they work constructively through potential disagreements in the group? Do they interact with acknowledgement and respect for the opinions of others? So all these aspects and questions are important already when in the process of preparation for participatory innovation processes in the area. This is particularly important for the facilitators of the process, so that they know what type of collaboration, what type of competing interests are there, and they can then prepare and take adequate approaches to work in the given situation, because nowhere and never the situation will be ideal for participatory process. The trick and the challenge and the real success comes when we can work in a normal environment with collaborative and competing interests together all the time, changing sometimes depending on the issue, but still manage to achieve common objectives and commonly agreed objectives. And this is the end of the actors and stakeholders part of module 3. Next part will be focused particularly on visioning.